And I said, oh, what do you do while he golfs? And she's like, I invest in myself. I take care of myself, and that makes me really happy. And you could tell that this woman was so happy with her life. Welcome to the Moms Makin Dough podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt, and today's episode is raw and real, coming off, actually like really real, because I'm coming off of getting in at a very delayed flight from an amazing trip to Mexico, which I'm going to talk about, and was the catalyst for recording this topic. And today's topic is going to be letting faith over fear lead your financial decisions. So like I said, I just got back from Mexico. In fact, I'm wearing the same outfit I slept in last night because this is my window to get this done. So moms, I know you can agree. You've been there before, so no judgment on the same. If you're listening to this episode and you saw me wearing this shirt yesterday, I wanted to just really, so here's the truth. I was supposed to record this podcast before I left for my trip. I sat down to do it and I was like, nope, you have to wait till the trip is over. Like, I got this really big download. And the reason is because I knew something was going to come up that was way more organic than what I was originally going to talk about, which was going to be today is October 15th, and it's the final day to do your taxes. So I was going to talk about what you could learn from filing your taxes, what you could do differently for next year. And even though I am pretty confident I could have made that entertaining, I just really sat with the fact that something was going to present itself that was actually way more relevant that I needed to be talking about. And I hope I am going to do this justice, because let me kind of back up a little bit. The last 3 weekends, I realized I have been so blessed that I have spent time with a multitude of different couples from all walks of life, couples that are just walking into getting married, couples that are getting remarried, couples that have been married 30 plus years, couples that this past weekend are from all over the world. We met in Mexico, and they were all so unique, such unique experiences, but so meaningful to me. And one of the things I started to reflect on as I was journaling, getting ready to think about like what is coming up for me to present today, was the fact of like what feels like I could talk about it forever. And I'm not going to talk about it forever, but I want to hit on some of the real meaningful, juicy conversations I had with other female entrepreneurs and or supportive spouses of men that own businesses or they've worked in their businesses before, and some of the reoccurring themes. And when I started to download the list of what were some of those themes, like what was some of the absolutely golden nuggets that were dropped in my lap when it comes to having the conversation about money. And the reason that I talk about that is the first thing that came up to me is that, like, if I look at all these organic conversations, again, many of these are couples that some of them I know very well. Others I just met this weekend or the previous weekend. And what really came up for me was I really wanted to reflect on like how money always finds its way into conversations. Reason being, it's the second most, maybe the first in some cases. It is by far one of the biggest topics in relationships is money, and then the other one's going to be sex. And even so much so that this is something my husband and I do a podcast together called The Weaponized Marriage. And we constantly go back and forth on all different sides of this topic. And it's just something that's become really passionate for not only me to talk about, but us to talk about as a couple. So today I wanted to talk about, because money is not just a relationship issue, when it comes to a partnership. It's also a reflection of how much we trust ourselves, our purpose, and also our provision. that's often already there. And so when I looked at this downloaded list of I literally wrote a list of all of the amazing women I met. And I would write their name, and then I'd write like what was a part of the conversation that stood out in my connection with them. And I kind of compiled it to a couple things, points that I'm going to go over today. But the overall theme and narrative was about how letting faith over fear really lead your financial decisions is the key from getting out of scarcity when it comes to your money and living a life full of abundance. And when I say abundance, I don't mean just on a financial level. I am meaning on a fulfillment level. And so I wanted to share some of kind of like snippets of the conversations because they mirror your belief. Your belief systems, they mirror your beliefs about yourself. They mirror your belief of what you're capable of. And I wanted really to touch on this theme that's really been coming up probably since the end of June for me of this mantra I've been really embracing and starting to explore, which is I'm fully provided for. And I brought it up on a couple other episodes and like starting to really add to this, like I'm fully capable, I'm fully provided for, and I am fully equipped to lead a fulfilling life. And not just a financial aspect, but in every aspect. So today's episode is just like, how do we start to shift our mindset? And it's always a work in progress, as it always is, on living with faith over fear. I am going to specifically talk a little bit more about our finances today, but this could be applied to your life, period. Mic drop. Okay. I want you to just really dive into the fact that, like I said, money conversations are mirrors, not only in our personal relationships, in our business relationships, in our partnerships with like our spouse or a significant other. And I just want to touch on like some of the, like I said, the lessons I've learned and reflected on this past weekend as I flew home on my very delayed flight last night. So I wanted to just bring that like fear. First of all, let's address fear. Fear, my favorite definition of fear, as cliche as it is that fear is false evidence appearing real. My other second favorite definition is it also means for some people, fuck everything and run. And I will be completely honest, for a lot of areas of my life, that old mantra, fuck everything and run, has been more appropriate than false evidence appearing real for a majority of my life. And I am consciously making a decision to switch from fuck everything and run and actually face the fear, the false evidence appearing real. And I wanted to kind of define on how I see fear showing up and how I started to name it a little bit better. And fear shows up as when it comes to women and money in three primary programming ways for me specifically, and maybe they resonate with you. I am sure there is multitudes we could come up with, but these were the ones that organically came up when I started really getting dialed in on like, what did I want to share today? And so here's how I think fear shows up for me. Undervaluing your worth or questioning like even how you price your goods, your services, whatever value you exchange for any financial compensation and or even appreciation if you are not someone that actually gets financial compensation for the value you bring to the work to the world and to your home and for yourself, right? We are all here to bring some sort of value. Like I am a huge believer in that God has a plan for you and puts you on this planet with a unique plan for you to pursue. And when the closer you are to pursuing his plan for you, the more you will be fulfilled in your life. And that's usually around a life of some sort of service, whether that is service to your customers, service to your family, service to your parents, service to yourself even. But fear shows up as constantly undervaluing your worth or questioning your worth, self-doubt around it. The second thing, worrying about what if instead of what's possible. This is a huge thing. I spend a lot of time myself in worry and anxious, not only when it becomes about money, but about multiple things, how I'm spending my time, how I'm raising my daughter, how I'm being a good, as a wife, how I'm being as a daughter. There are so many things as a woman, so many hats we wear where we worry about what if this happens or what if they say this instead of what's possible. And it's another element of fear that I feel like many women, myself included, like I said, rears its ugly head at times, and we have to address. And the third one that I'm going to address today is the concept of years of programming of what I call hustle harder mentality, instead of leading with faith and trust more than I can outwork someone. Or I can outthink someone, or there's never a problem I can't solve mentality, which is in many cases an amazing skill set to have, but it can also become a prison for many of us, myself included at times, where it's like, I can just make more money, or I can just outwork that person, or outthink that person. And there are very hard instances where I've learned this the hard way, that is actually not the truth, but that still doesn't override this programming of I can just hustle harder. And that instead of actually face the fear and try a different approach, or trust more, have more faith. And then we look at the opposite. So those are the three things that I'm kind of focusing on: faith, that downloaded for me. Then we look at when it comes to fear, this is what comes up when I thought about faith. Number one, knowing your needs will be met when you move in alignment, when you are on the path that God has created for you, rather than where you are at what I call in flow rather than force. A lot of people say this is more when you're like in your feminine energy, where you're starting to really value like what things feel good to you, which as women, especially in business, we are taught not to base our decisions on feelings and override this programming that is actually like our primal programming, is to really sit with our feelings. The second thing when faith shows up is when I take inspired action instead of panic action. So if we think about the one I talked about before with the worrying about what if instead of what's possible, instead of getting stuck in what ifs, in inspired action, we are being proactive about being in alignment rather than being in a reactivity where we're in constant panic mode and constantly reacting to our environment, to situations, to other people, to events, to, how much is in our bank account. And it causes us to be more panicked because it's fear driven, versus when it's faith driven, it's much more inspired and we feel called to it instead of forced to do something. And then the third one is being really open to receive. Open to receive, man, if I could pick the one I struggle the most with, it would be this one here. It is a constantly evolving lesson for me of being open to receive, whether that be financially, whether that mean help, whether that mean rest, whether that means opportunities, whether that means support. I find specifically, this is the one that people have the hardest time actually grasping. Like I said, myself included, is being open to receive. Typically females, I find, and I think some people listening to this, actually, I know nobody listening to this is going to think this is a generalization, because they're going to be able to relate to it. And that is that it is so easy for us to be givers. It is part of a female psyche's makeup in a healthy female is to want to give, to want to serve, to want to be of value to not only your own life, but mostly it's way easier to be of value to other people's lives. And the receiving part is where it gets dicey. Again, myself included, is like, this is the one that I'm constantly working for. How it shows up for me, fuck. It is so hard for me to ask for help at times. I didn't really realize this until I became a mom on how hard this is, because it's a habit I have not done often enough. It is not ingrained to just naturally ask for help. And I always think about this, especially since I flew yesterday. Every time it happens, it's the biggest metaphor I feel like for us women is like when they're going over, you're about to take off on the airplane, they're going over the the safety protocols, right? And they said, should cabin pressure drop, oxygen masks will be released from the ceiling. Please secure your own mask before putting it over, helping others. And I'm like, man, that makes so much sense. So why is that so difficult every time they say it? And it makes me really kind of think about this concept of like how hard it is for us as women to put on our own masks, even in times of complete and utter chaos. And how the concept of like, I think that if you're ever in any sort of crisis, people look for the person that's the calmest in the room. And that, again, is a primal instinct, is to gravitate towards someone that is being proactive and staying centered rather than someone that's completely erratic, off-centered, and being reactive. So being open to receive money, help, rest, opportunities, love, feelings of joy, things that actually fill not only your bank account, but most of all, your life. And so here's some of the things that I covered with some of the amazing women I've had the opportunity to spend some time with. And I kind of categorize them because I really think that I saw some themes. There were multiple conversations that had themes that would come. So these were some of the themes I wrote down in my brain dump to capture some of the amazing conversation I've had with women from all ages, all walks of life over the last 3 weekends that I've been blessed to have, where this is very unique that I've had 3 action-packed weekends and had the opportunity to rest and receive some of this amazing conversation. So first snippet I wanted to share. Number 1, how much we women consistently question our worth and therefore our value. When this questioning of our worth is something that I have struggled with my majority of my life. I still struggle with at times. I'm always paying, I call spidey sense awareness to, because that's why I chose it to be number 1. It was one thing that I had multiple conversations with many different women about how hard it was for them to charge what they were worth or know what to charge, specifically when it comes to pricing their services that they offer. And again, this is something like if you ask a man how to do it, and I don't want to get in male versus female psyche, but like if you ask a male, like they have no problem being like, this will be, $200 for my time for 20 minutes on a phone call with me, versus you ask a woman to do that and they will constantly undercharge or say, you don't pay me or you don't owe me anything. And how do I balance that with fear? Like if that's coming from fear on what should I charge? What am I worth? You start to look at like the face side of it. And the face side of it is I'm already equipped and my work deserves to be rewarded. And when I say rewarded, it means that it has some sort of energy exchange. And that does not mean necessarily that it is a financial exchange. Even though money is energy, that is an exchange of energy. Um, but it has some sort of value exchange where it is clear to whatever parties are involved on who's delivering the value and at what, I don't want to say cost because it's not a cost, but what energy exchange. And so I really want you to start to think of like the big gleaming thing on this part, on this first snippet, was the fact that this is a conversation on, I had this conversation with women that are stay-at-home moms on like, what am I worth? Because I never brought a financial dollar into the house. I've had this conversation with women that are in their 30s that make more money than sometimes than like a person in a couple days, what a person would make in a whole year. I've had this conversation with women that are in their 60s that are still talking about how hard it was for them to go from a certain amount they were charging to the next level and about how shocked they were. And then I had other women that were talking about how like they completely undercharged and realized how much money they made this person and that this person would have paid them probably 3 to 5 times more than they actually charged if they had asked for it. And so just really starting to think about like there's all different types of dynamics that women question our worth and how important this is to really start with is like, hey, what, like how am I positioning my worth and what is the energy exchange I'm asking? And is it in alignment so that I feel my work is rewarded? Because the work you do, whatever it is, whether you are that stay-at-home mom or you are that business entrepreneur or you are that real estate investor, is your work deserves to be compensated. And that is how you start to build confidence and trust in your worth and go from fear into faith in that category. Second one is, big conversation came up all the time on polarity in your marriage, in your partnership. And this, when I say partnership, it might not be a marriage. It might be your partnership in your actual business. I have many, many women entrepreneurs I work with that have partners, many of them that have male partners. And it was so interesting how much this dynamic of exploring, making more. I had some women that I know that make more than their spouse. There were some scenarios where their spouses were actually stay-at-home spouses while they actually were the breadwinners, and how that affected their relationship, how they balanced it. And here's the thing. This is, going from a fear-based frame to the faith-based frame. Of all of these themes and all of these conversations I had with these women of all ages, walks of life, it was really discussing with your partner, whether it's marriage and or business relationship, to like what level of with a level of respect rather than harboring resentment, and really clearly communicating on who brings what value, and so that you felt like there was an even exchange. And the biggest frame I had on this one that I wrote down and took away is that when you lead from fear of polarity in a partnership, like I said, whether it's marriage and or business partnership, where it feels like maybe one person's doing more than another and it's not justified, that leads to resentment over respect. And really coming back to figure out what levels do you respect each other so that resentment doesn't harbor instead. Because resentment, as we know, leads to the end of even the best relationships. So the frame that I kind of use is that we're a team, not competitors. And this is also something that I realized in every single couple that I talked with. Like I said, all walks of life. When one of the things that really stood out was when I was with the Knights, which is the chiropractic mastermind my husband belongs to. They call it a brotherhood, and this was the wives weekend. So I got to meet all the wives in the group. And what was so amazing was the different phases and level of support that these women had carried through with their husbands. And one of the women that really left such an amazing impact on me, my action item after I finish this episode today is I'm going to write her a note. I'm so excited about it because she doesn't know it's coming. And she was 78 years old. Her and her husband, I believe, was the same age. They've been married for, I think she said over 30 years. I think it was 35. And actually, no, it was even more than that. I think it was almost 50 years. I think she said they had been married. And, you could tell the level of respect this man had for his wife. And one of the questions I asked her, because clearly he's retired now, I said, what do you guys like to do? And I said, what do you personally like to do? And so she shared some of those things with me. And then I said, what do you guys do as a couple? And I could not believe the level of respect she spoke about with her husband, about how like he really enjoys this. So he does this on this. His thing was golf. So he loves to golf. And I said, oh, what do you do while he golfs? And she's like, I invest in myself. I take care of myself, and that makes me really happy. And you could tell that this woman was so happy with her life. And she started telling me some other stories, and she just was dropping these nuggets of just sage wisdom. And I so enjoyed my time with her, which is why I'm sending her a note to let her know how much I enjoyed her. But the one frame that she really said, like, again, she's like, we're always a team. We've been a team since in every phase. And she proceeded to tell me, which she couldn't believe that I knew this. She told me about how, again, her husband they're all chiropractors. So he's a chiropractor. And it was before they had software, like, software that you would manage your schedule. And she said in the blizzard of 78, right? I was like, oh, my mom's told me about the blizzard of 78. She said, I personally went, they lived in Ohio. She's like, I personally went to the office and we called every single person to reschedule because of the blizzard. And this is what she said. She said, because we've always worked as a team instead of competitors. And I was like, again, mic drop, such a golden nugget that we could apply to not just our businesses, but our relationships and our overall lives. So that was my second one. And then the third lesson that really stood out, that had a reoccurring appearance and theme, was the value of something I actually talked about in my time blocking episode last week, was your buyback rate. And if you can outsource something less than your hourly value, it is not a splurge for your family. It is stewardship. And it made me start thinking, and it's funny because Ryan, my husband, joined into this conversation when I was talking to, and the woman that I was talking to is one of my very, very good friends, and she is an extremely successful attorney, which you would never know this about her unless you were very close to her or have worked with her before. And what was amazing in this group is we started to talk about how, like, none of us ever talk about what we do in this part on our couples retreat. And because we're focused on such more fulfilling and connecting conversations, but we're talking about how she was asking me about, I was sharing about how amazing it has been for us to have a chef that cooks for us a couple of days a week. And I was telling her what that looked like. And we were starting to talk about how, like, we started outsourcing things. Like, first it was like we got our house cleaned twice a week by a cleaner. And about how at the beginning, when we were a little bit scarce and this was a stretch for us, this seemed like a splurge. But now we look at it as stewardship, because a lot of the people that we use in our everyday lives, like our friend Jamie, we're starting to refer people to her because they need her service, right? Our friend, my cleaner Lau, she's been our office cleaner for years, and then she does my house in exchange for care at our office. I don't even financially, again, exchange, right? I don't financially exchange with her. She gets paid for the office, but for our personal home, she does that in exchange for chiropractic care from Ryan. So it's an exchange, a fair exchange, and it's something we so value. And even I was driving my father-in-law to the airport this morning, even though I just left it. And when I was driving him, he's like, wow, your cleaner was really amazing and so sweet. And it reminded me about how when she first started, it was such a splurge. And now it is stewardship because I know it's a service that she really values from us and we really value from her. We also provide financial stability for her family because she cleans our office every week. And that is a financial exchange. And so just really remembering that hiring help with cooking, laundry, maybe it's administration tasks, those are things that are faith driven instead of when they're fear driven, like, oh, I shouldn't be spending this. It's, or I could be doing this myself mentality. That scarcity starts to come in. And instead it says, I'm freeing up space for the work I'm called to do instead of, I can't afford this or I shouldn't be spending this money. And then the final real big theme that I really wanted to touch on today was one that was, again, very organic, and it's on who you surround yourself with. Because here's what I realized. When we are talking about fear over faith in not only your finances, but your life, faith grows in fertile ground. Like it grows where whatever seeds you plant, but they need to be watered regularly. They need nourishment. And this is where I think it is so powerful. And I feel so blessed right now to say this, that like we are finally starting to surround ourselves with couples and beyond people that really just, they want community and connection just like we do. And they are people that are going to help expand us and help us grow. They're going to water the fertile ground and provide nourishment for the fertile ground that we're working on planting seeds in every day. And because a seed without water, a seed without the nutrients it needs, a seed without sunlight is not going to grow on its own. And so really starting to think about when it comes to faith over fear is like, who are you surrounding yourself with? Are you surrounded with people that are saying, I can't afford that, or that's not worth my time, or all of these, like as cliche as they sound, little sayings that is actually indication of the belief system, instead of these people that are like, hey, I never look at my bank account because I just trust it's always going to be provided for. And, or I I go to really solid people for my financial investment advice, or I go to someone I trust versus someone I found at TD Bank who I have no relationship with. And that's really, in my opinion, and I'm going to digress on a story here right now. I just went into TD Bank recently, and it was last week prior to my vacation because I realized I needed to be able to access my mom's bank account because she's getting older and there is definitely some things I need to start helping her with. So one of the things I had said to her, I was like, hey, I need my own password and stuff like that. I knew I was already on the account. And I walk into TD Bank and I give the guy my license and I said, he's like, whoa. He's like, we have not seen you here for 15 years, 15. And I was like, oh yeah. I was like, yeah, I haven't had an account here for a long time. And I don't know how he knew this. Oh, I think I gave him my email to set up my own personal online password. And he's like, oh, what is Innate Wellness Center? And I said, oh, that's my business. And he's like, oh, who do you have your business accounts with? So I kind of told him and then knew where the conversation was going, but I didn't have the saving graces. They were closing, so he couldn't get into this conversation with me. And he said, yeah, we also have financial planners here and blah, blah, blah. And he just was doing his little like spiel, which like he was clearly the manager and like that's part of his job, right? Is to promote the services they provide. And it made me really think, as nice as he was and as helpful as he was for that one thing that I needed his help on at that moment, about how like there's a different type of person that walks into a bank and doesn't have a relationship and is attempting to build one. But then there's something to be said for being surrounded by people of all walks of life, of all ages, that just have sage wisdom that you can grasp these little golden nuggets, but it doesn't matter if you have all of these golden nuggets, right? If you don't give them the nourishment they need for which they will help you grow. So this is part of what I call undoing that hustle harder programming. And it's a personal shift from believing hustle equals success to learning that peace equals power. And that peace starts with having faith and starting to let your financial decisions be led by faith instead of fear. And when I say faith, I don't necessarily mean religious faith. That word might mean that for you. It sure does for me. But it also means just generally trust. Trust in you that you are fully provided for. Trust that you are fully capable. Trust that you are fully equipped. And you deserve to lead a fulfilling life. And I want you to really just start to think back on the surround yourself with people that help nourish you. Is that like, who are you sitting at the table with? Are you sitting with people that stretch your capacity? And I'm not talking just in a financial aspect. Or are you sitting with people that are really just, shrink your courage? And which one do you want more of? Because that means you're going to have to make a different decision to really undo this hustle harder programming where it's like, hey, I can do this by myself. I think about my now 5-year-old daughter when she says, I can do this by myself. I do this by myself all the time. And it's funny because you know that she's usually saying she can do something herself. That's something she really can't do herself. And about how that programming sticks with us our whole life. So let me tell you a couple really good ways I find that you can start to have more faith, less fear, and start to trust not only yourself, but the process to live more in peace, more in your power, and more in your purpose. And that is this. Number one, keep a gratitude ledger. That is by far my first thing, is that like something, if you want something to expand, the more grateful you are for it, the bigger it will grow. Then, track evidence, I like to say. Keep a journal. Keep a journal of evidence of unexpected provision, whether it means unexpected blessings, unexpected checks, unexpected clients, unexpected gifts, unexpected, we can remove that late fee or whatever it is, like little things like that. Because the more you live in expectation of blessing, the more they will start to present themselves to you. And then the other thing is make giving a part of your growth plan, but also make receiving a priority. How can you receive? And it might be not receiving a financial gift. It might be receiving a compliment or a simple thank you for listening, or a simple gift of someone's presence when you really needed it the most. So faith doesn't mean you don't check your numbers. It doesn't mean that you avoid them. It doesn't mean that you keep distracting yourself. It means you stop letting fear control the conversation and you create space for more presence, more peace, and more purpose in your life. And that's how I truly see you start to let faith over fear not only lead your financial decisions, but your life. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Moms Making Dough as much as I enjoyed delivering it. And as always, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe so that you can get more of our content. And please, 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 if you found this episode helpful, share it with someone who might also not have heard it, but need to hear it as well. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time on Moms Making Dough.